hand that gripped my wrist was not human skin. It felt like rotting leather stretched over bone. I barely had time to scream before the pressure forced me backward into the bed. My roommate, Miguel, was already shouting my name from the hallway. I could hear his heavy footsteps thudding against the carpeted floor of the corridor. I sat up, gasping for air, clutching my wrist where the bruise was already forming in a sickly shade of yellow and purple. The room was silent. The air felt thick, like breathing through a wet cloth. We were staying at a boutique hotel in Antipolo for our company's quarterly planning. It was an old building, converted from a private estate. The wood panels on the walls were dark, and the heavy curtains blocked out most of the moonlight. Miguel burst into the room, his face pale. He looked at my wrist and then at me, his eyes wide with panic. "Are you okay?" he gasped. "I heard you scream." I couldn't find my voice for a moment, and his pointed toward the bathroom door, which was slightly ajar. The shower was running. That is what Miguel said when he saw it. We both stood there, frozen. The sound of splashing water and hissing steam filled the small space, but we were the only people on this floor. The hotel had a strict policy about noise after 10 o'clock. No one was supposed to be in their room at this hour except for us. I walked toward the door. My legs felt heavy, like I was walking through mud. "Wait," I whispered to Miguel. "Don't go in there yet." But he was already moving. He reached for the handle and pushed it open. The steam hit us first. It smelled of sulfur and old copper. It didn't smell like soap or shampoo. It smelled like something that had been rotting under the floorboards for decades. The shower was running, but the curtain was pulled tight across the tub. Miguel stepped into the small bathroom area. I watched his silhouette through the steam. He reached out and grabbed the edge of the curtain. "Who's there?" he shouted. He yanked the curtain back with such force that it hit the wall with a dull thud. There was no one inside the tub. The water was still running, pouring over an empty porcelain basin. But as Miguel stepped forward to turn off the faucet, his foot hit something soft on the floor. The tile floor was covered in water. It looked like a pool of liquid had spilled from the shower and spread across the tiles toward the door. But as he watched it, the water disappeared. It didn't soak into the tiles. It didn't evaporate. It just vanished instantly, leaving the floor bone dry in a fraction of a second. One moment there was a puddle, and the next, not a single drop remained. Miguel jumped back. He pointed at the drain. The water wasn't coming from the shower head anymore. It was bubbling up from the cracks between the tiles. The sound of the water stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was heavier than the noise had been. I felt a prickle on the back of my neck. I looked toward the corner of the room where the wardrobe stood. The wood seemed to groan just slightly. We didn't stay in the bathroom. We backed out into the main room and shut the door, locking it with a heavy deadbolt. "I want to go to our rooms," I said. "Just let us sleep." Miguel didn't answer for a moment. He was staring at the door we had just closed. "Are you sure no one is in there?" he whispered. His voice was trembling. I nodded, but my hands were shaking so much I had to hide them in my pockets. I could feel the bruise on my wrist throbbing in time with my heartbeat. It felt like something underneath my skin was trying to crawl out. We sat on the edge of our respective beds for an hour. The only sound was the ticking of a clock on the bedside table. Every few minutes, I would hear a faint thud from behind the bathroom door. It sounded like someone or something was pacing in that small space. Thump, thump, thump. It wasn't a human gait. It was uneven. It sounded heavy, as if the walker had too many limbs or was dragging something heavy behind them. I tried to focus on my laptop, looking at the spreadsheets for our marketing plan, but the numbers blurred together. I kept thinking about the way the water vanished from the floor. "Is it just a draft?" I asked him, trying to sound brave. "Maybe the plumbing is old and it's just making noise." Miguel didn't look up from his phone. He was staring at the screen, but I could see his thumbs weren't moving. He was paralyzed by what he had seen in that bathroom. "It's not the pipes, Miguel." I said it firmly enough that he finally looked at me. His eyes were bloodshot. "You saw the water disappear. No pipe makes water vanish like that. And you heard that thing hit me when I went to check the hall earlier." I hadn't told him about the grab on my wrist. I hadn't wanted him to know how close it had come to catching me. But now, in the dark of room 7, the truth felt like a weight in my chest. Suddenly, the bathroom door creaked open. It didn't swing wide. It just drifted open an inch. A thin line of gray light from the hallway filtered through the gap. Then came the smell, the rot. It filled the room in seconds, making my eyes water. Something was moving out of the bathroom and into the main area of the room. We both sat perfectly still, our breathing shallow. It didn't move like a person. It moved with a series of jerky, clicking sounds, like bones snapping into place every time it took a step. The sound of something dragging across the carpet was slow. Scrape, scrape, scrape. It stopped right in front of my bed. I could hear it breathing. It wasn't a human breath. It sounded like air being sucked through a wet sponge, bubbling. Wet. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying it would just move on. I didn't want to see what was standing over me. Then a voice came from the darkness. It wasn't a scream. It was a whisper that sounded like two stones grinding together. Ko, Hindi, Dapat, Dido, you shouldn't be here. The words were distorted, as if the speaker didn't have the right muscles to form the sounds correctly. Miguel gasped. The sound of his intake of air was loud in the silent room. I opened my eyes just a crack. I saw a shape towering over me. It was tall, too tall for the ceiling height. It was hunched over, its head tilted at an impossible angle to one side. One arm was elongated, the fingers ending in jagged points that scraped against the wooden headboard of my bed. It wasn't looking at me with eyes. It had pits where eyes should be, weeping a thick black fluid that dripped onto my pillow. I stayed frozen. I didn't move a muscle. I didn't even blink. The thing moved closer. I could feel the coldness radiating from it. It was like standing next to an open freezer. The air around it felt brittle. Then it leaned down. Its face, if you could call it that, was inches from mine. The skin was gray and stretched so tight over the skull that it looked like it would crack at any moment. It let out a low, rattling hiss. And then it moved toward Miguel's bed. I heard him gasp again. I heard the rustle of his sheets as he tried to retreat against the wall. The thing reached his side and began to make a clicking sound, faster now, like a frantic heartbeat. Yamales, leave. It was a command, a warning. It knew we were intruders in its space. Then the lights in the room flickered violently. They didn't just dim, they pulsed with a sickly yellow light that seemed to vibrate. The thing let out a piercing shriek, a sound so high and raw it felt like a physical blow to my ears. I felt my nose begin to bleed. I dove toward Miguel, grabbing his arm and pulling him toward the door. We didn't care about being quiet anymore. We didn't care about the rules of the hotel. We just needed out. We scrambled out of the room and into the hallway. The corridor was long and shadowed. I could hear other people in their rooms, but they were silent, perhaps sensing the tension in the air. We didn't stop running until we reached the lobby. The front desk clerk was sitting there, his face illuminated by a small lamp. He looked up as we stumbled toward him, both of us gasping for air, our faces pale and drenched in sweat. "What happened?" he asked, his voice calm but concerned. "We need to leave," I managed to say. "Now, we don't care about the deposit, we just want out." The clerk looked at me, then at Miguel. He saw my bruised wrist. He saw the way my nose was bleeding onto my shirt. He didn't ask any more questions. He simply reached under the counter and pulled out a heavy ring of keys. He led us to the side exit that opened into the parking lot. The air outside felt different, cleaner, cooler, but still, there was a lingering sense of dread in the atmosphere. We didn't stop until we were inside Miguel's car, several blocks away from the hotel grounds. Then, the silence of the night settled over us. We sat in the parked car for a long time, the engine off, just listening to the sound of our own hearts beating. I finally looked at my wrist. The bruise wasn't just yellow anymore, it was turning black. And in the center of it, where the thing had quipped me, the skin felt hot to the touch. Miguel reached over and took my hand. His hands were shaking violently. "Did you see its face?" he whispered. I saw enough. He didn't say anything else for a long time. He just sat there, staring at the dark hills of Antipolo in the distance. The next morning, we received an email from the hotel management. They apologized for the disturbance and informed us that they were aware of the issues with room 7. It was an old room, and they had been trying to renovate it for months due to structural problems. I didn't mention the girl-like voice or the way the water vanished. I didn't tell them about the thing that stood over my bed, because if I told them, they would know that I had seen it, and some things are better left in the shadows of a room that no longer exists on their blueprints. But every night since then, when I fall asleep, I can still hear it. Not from a hallway, not from a hotel in Antipolo, but from just behind my bedroom door. The sound of water bubbling up through the floorboards, the scent of sulfur and rot, and the low, rattling hiss of something that doesn't want me to stay. I haven't been able to sleep in a room with a bathroom for more than an hour at a time. I can still feel those long, sharp fingers grazing my wrist, waiting for me to fall asleep so it can whisper again. The question isn't whether the thing is still in room 7. The question is whether it followed me home. Sometimes when I go into my own bathroom, I notice a small puddle on the floor near the drain. I watch it for a few seconds, waiting for it to vanish. It doesn't. It just sits there, clear and still, as if it's waiting for me to notice it's not just water. When did you last check your own bathroom door to see if it was locked?